So you started C4 around March, and you joined around the same time as me, I think. So I joined in Feb, but I didn't actually do my first audit until like March or April, something like that. So you joined around the same time, but you are now ranked 14th on the leaderboard with over 100K in rewards, which, pretty amazing progress, obviously. So you must have had some sort of technical background before joining. So what's your story, and how did you find yourself in this industry?
Yeah, I have, I guess, kind of an interesting story. I feel like everyone has an interesting story on how they stumbled onto C4. A lot of people aren't coming from like traditional penetration testing backgrounds, and I'm one of those people. I actually have a data background. So I was doing database design, data warehousing, and business intelligence. And I guess for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been working with a specific piece of BI software. And basically, this entire time, I was just working as a consultant with that BI software, and looking for interesting ways to break its functionality to make it do specific things. And it kind of taught me this kind of mindset for, I don't know, kind of acting like an attacker, and kind of trying to penetrate the software to do what you needed to do. And I think that lent over really nicely when I switched over to auditing. I got into crypto and eventually, or pretty quickly, got into the security side without actually knowing much Solidity code. And I just started looking for attack paths on C4, some of my first contests, and without actually knowing much about Solidity, it was interesting to kind of see how I was able to understand some of the places that code could go wrong. And it paid off pretty nicely in the beginning, I would say, without actually knowing too much.
Yeah, back then, you could just earn quite a bit on Code4rena without being that high of a level.
Yeah, totally.
So how did you actually learn Solidity that quick? Because you don't have a developer background, as you said.
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually didn't know Solidity very well, specifically for a good amount of time through my auditing journey. I guess if I were to go back, originally learning Solidity through YouTube, I think Smart Contract Programmer, that's a YouTube channel I was following for that.
Yeah.
Just to learn the basics. Yeah, he's good. Just to learn the basics. But a lot of the nuances I actually had no idea of. But that's kind of one of the interesting things about auditing, or C4 specifically. You don't actually have to master the language in order to spot vulnerabilities. Just looking at how inputs and parameters can be spoofed, I think, is a large portion of the vulnerabilities that I found early on. Not necessarily, if you can follow code execution and you can understand what someone can do with inputs, I think that gets you a long way. And I've been kind of a pseudo developer for a while, just doing basic Python projects myself, and applying that to my role as a BI developer. And I had enough of a background in coding that understanding code was doable, and then the Solidity kind of came later.
Right. Yeah. I guess that input spoofing stuff relates to your database work quite well, because that's a lot of things you do similar as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I think for me, I only started learning Solidity at the beginning of this year, maybe December last year, January this year, or something like that. I watched Patrick Collins' YouTube channel. He had a 32-hour Solidity tutorial. I'm not sure if you watched that or not. I didn't watch the whole thing, but that was just the base level where I can then move on to CTFs and other sort of learning material. What are sort of the other learning resources that you would say helped you the most just getting started?
Yeah, there was a lot. I think all the ones I followed really came from one actual resource that grouped them all. I'm not sure if you've seen Sleepy's master list of how to learn blockchain penetration. That was really my all-in-one. I just went down the list and did as many of those as I could. So starting with Mastering Ethereum, I think, is the book that's referenced in there. Doing crypto zombies, the interactive, how to learn Solidity. I kind of just went down the list there, and eventually I stopped. I don't think I made it all the way down the list. But that gave me a good enough base to continue onwards, and that's really when I went heavily in C4.
Right. And did you do that before you joined C4, or you just started
Kind of all at the same
after
time,
you
I
joined
guess.
C4?
Yeah. I think I audited a few, but I say audited. I actually mean I read through the code bases of a couple C4 contests before I actually submitted anything, just to kind of see how I might do without actually pulling the trigger. So while I was learning, I was kind of trying to audit at the same time, and eventually, I think it was maybe my third or fourth contest that I was actually looking into. I actually pulled the trigger and submitted something.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to approach it. I did something similar because I was going back and forth between the tutorials and then Code4rena and then CTFs, just like not getting stuck in that sort of tutorial hell where you're just like learning from tutorials again and again and never getting to that practical stuff, because like layering like the practical and the theory together, I think Code4rena fits quite well with that as well, because you can audit, you can do an audit, you can pause and then read other people's like previous findings, and then you can go back and do an audit again. So it kind of layers that theory and practice together really well, which
Completely,
I found quite interesting.
I realized after the first couple of contests that I was trying, I was kind of thinking the same way and not really finding too much. It was when I took a step back and read through the past audit reports where it just like jumped me up a few levels every time I read a report, it seemed like. Just understanding what you can look for was just invaluable.
Yeah, just getting exposed to more of the things that's possible that you can find in Solidity. Have you got like a set auditing methodology that you use? I actually saw a video from Joran from Consensus just the other day. He was saying auditors mostly they either read the code first, the doc first, or like run visualization tools, all to sort of help them understand how everything fits together. Do you have a similar process that you go through?
Yeah, that's kind of evolved over the past year. I would say what I'm looking at right now and has worked well for me in recent history is just run through the code base for the contracts that probably hold funds, or the most, the contracts that are most monumental in running the protocol, just for low-hanging fruit, just to understand kind of the main pieces there. And then I go to the docs to understand the bigger picture. Starting with docs usually just feels a little bit slow and sluggish to me. I do find a good amount of stuff first pass through, even without understanding too much context, so that seems to have paid off. I kind of follow like kind of a hybrid methodology of looking for quick findings that might earn a few bucks, and then kind of going back and understanding the bigger picture. And then once you understand the bigger picture, after maybe a day or so, that's when I seem to find more like interesting vulnerabilities that are a little bit more unique. I do think starting a little bit quicker, but also then taking a step back to understand everything really pays off. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, so you are more of a code first just initially, and then you would refer to the docs and other sort of tools afterwards to get the big picture.
Yeah, completely.
Were you doing this as a side gig, or were you focusing full time on it?
It was a side gig for just a short period of time. I was lucky enough to do well in one of my first contests that I submitted in, and immediately after payout, I kind of just made the decision to jump in full time because it seemed to be the right thing to do. I'm not sure if that was a smart decision, but here we are, still doing it. So I guess that's good.
Okay, that's a pretty ballsy move. Because Code4rena has gotten a lot harder since then. Yeah. And a lot of people I spoke to back then, they were thinking, I'm going to do this full time, but the landscape has changed quite a lot.
Yeah, I wasn't quite expecting such a quick shift in how that looked. Around the time, I think it was around May or June when OpenSea came on, that kind of started a shift, and it seemed to change pretty quickly after that. I haven't been too active on C4 since around, I would say, August or September.
Yeah. So after that shift, was there any particular reason that you shifted away from C4? Was it just because it wasn't as profitable as before, or were you sort of finding other or better opportunities elsewhere?
Yeah, I started doing some hunting on Immunefi. I've actually started Immunefi around the same time as C4, but went a little bit more heavily towards Immunefi sometime around June, July, August. Had a little bit of success there, had some failures there as well, just due to the state of bug bounties and how things can shake out there. And I guess since September or October, I've actually been pretty much full-time in creating my own bug bounty platform along with my partner, which
Nice.
I think we've discussed it at some point before.
Yeah. So you went from C4 to Immunefi, and I think you told me before that you had some stories around that. You found something was like a governance manipulation, and then they refused to pay out or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about that story?
Yeah, I guess without going too into detail about who it is and what it is, I guess. Bug bounties are great because they can really change your life with just a single finding. But also sometimes you find something that obviously could be a duplicate. Duplicates happen. But this particular case was finding a governance manipulation that's currently exploitable and can tap into their reserves of, I think at the time it was like 500 million, although that wouldn't quite be that much based on liquidity of the token that could be stolen and trying to cash that out. But they were completely fine with having that vulnerability live in the wild. And I'm sure I was not even the second person to report it. I'm sure plenty of people have reported that because it was pretty glaring. So it's interesting to see that happens sometimes.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Like when I hear stories like this, it kind of makes me hesitate whether I should try my hand at Immunefi or not, because it's kind of like hit and miss, right? And I was speaking to 100 Proof before. He found a 150k bug, and like sometimes the project just refuses to acknowledge it, and there's really nothing you can do, which kind of sucks. And you wasted all this time and effort into finding this bug. Was that an issue? Like, could you actually drain funds with that governance manip, or was it more like a theoretical thing?
You could. There were some safeguards in place that would make it, you could get caught in the act of doing it. For example, you could run the exploit and amass infinite voting power, pass a proposal, but there's still a 2-day waiting period that the team is able to veto it. So there's a centralization piece there that they could stop you if they were even monitoring it. So there's that, but anyone technically could try. It's just the case there specifically was their token. The token that you could exploit, the governance token is the token that they're shilling everywhere. So they don't want to migrate that token. Because that would probably hurt their market cap, and investors would pull out of holding that token. So that's why they're willing to look the other way.
Right, and you said like probably a few people are aware of this, and they just sort of refuse to acknowledge it.
Right.
And have they released any information about this, or they just kept quiet?
I don't think any information has been released as of when I was still trying to contact them. I guess this is just a month or two ago. They're still telling people that it's their governance token and can be used for governance purposes. So if they still want to advertise that, I guess they're willing to look past it.
Right. That's just crazy. Like these bugs they just leave in the wild, and that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, though on the flip side, I have had good experiences somewhat more recently with similar findings. Governance manipulations that are even less severe than that, they choose to pay out. Just to say, bug hunting itself is kind of a risky game. It is a toss of the coin, but there are projects that are more than fair with how they pay out.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the project. If they care about security at all, then it's in their best interest to actually pay out, right? Because then it'll encourage more people to actually report it rather than exploit it in the future.
Right. One thing I learned pretty early is that only really the cream of the crop of findings are really payable for a good sum. In the beginning, I was looking for pretty much any and all bugs that could, earn me some money, like griefing, freezing someone's funds for a few days, anything along those lines, because those technically fit in frozen funds that might fit into a high. But really, those are the bugs that I don't think projects actually care about too much, because not much harm is done, and they're probably not willing to pay out even the listed amount for those. It's really the stealing the entire pools. Actually, myself and another researcher, we submitted a theft of funds. I think this was back in September, but it was theft directly out of user wallets, and that would require basically the moment someone approved the contract to spend their tokens, anyone could steal them. So it's one of those kind of in-transit bugs that as of the time of reporting, the amount that could be stolen is 0. But every time someone approves, you have that small window between approval and transaction that someone can steal. And that's kind of a good example of a bug that, since no funds are technically at risk right now, the project doesn't treat it as if it's a big theft of funds kind of exploit.
Right. So did you get a payout for that, or?
Yeah, they downgraded to medium for that, which I thought was interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Still got a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. So I guess like the C4 sort of bugs, like the mediums, they wouldn't really get accepted for any sort of pay on Immunefi.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of my experience. Certain things I've submitted to C4 would definitely be downgraded to potentially lower or lower. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because there's that incentive to not pay and always downgrade on Immunefi. It's not like that on Code4rena where they already pay the money. They're not really incentivized to actually downgrade you, and they want to reward people who are submitting findings on Code4rena. So it's that interesting dynamic there with C4 and Immunefi.
Yeah, definitely. And you definitely be. It's definitely interesting which projects seem to be a little bit more stingy with their payouts. Some of the biggest projects that you can think of that are listed on Immunefi are pretty allergic to the idea of paying out a legitimate bounty. And some of the smaller projects that you wouldn't think would have the funds to do so are actually very fair with their payouts. So it's definitely interesting to see that.
Right. And so for someone who is trying to get into Immunefi and they're picking like a project to work on, do you have any tips to like figure out which project is like a legit one that's actually going to pay out, or is it just like the sort of luck of the draw?
Yeah, I'd say if I could go back and like reinvest the last year looking at projects, I would definitely only look at new ones that are listed. And also if I were to look at some older ones, I would at least make sure that their GitHub has been updated recently. I spent way too much time looking at repos that hadn't had a commit in the last 12 months or so or more. And those are the ones that aren't in active development, and either there are no bugs or the bugs there have probably been reported and just aren't going to lead to a payout. So one thing that's worked for me somewhat recently is following, just tracking GitHub repos for recent commits and finding bugs before they're even pushed to production. If you followed, I think it was Riptide back several months ago, he found a bug, I can't remember the protocol. He was explaining that he actually found it sometime before it was pushed to production and was just kind of waiting it out until they pushed, and then was able to submit his finding that won him like 500 ETH or something similar.
Yeah, I think he got around 400K of ETH, something like that. Yeah.
That's a good approach.
That is a pretty interesting strategy. What do you think of the ethical ramifications of like that? Because you already found the bug and you're waiting for them to push into live before you tell them, and potentially like money could be lost before they realize that, right? So
that's a really good point.
There's a bit
actually
of that factor in there.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that too much. I guess I haven't successfully actually pulled that off yet. That's interesting. I don't know how I'd feel about that, because as a white hat, you're kind of walking the line between being extremely ethical and also trying to make a living off of it. It's pretty common practice that if you report a bug to a project that doesn't have a legitimate bug bounty program on like Immunefi, for example, you'll just be stiffed and you won't be paid. That's happened to me several times, just trying to go kind of rogue and find bugs and submit them as a good Samaritan. It almost never leads to a payout. So with something like an Immunefi bounty, it's maybe it's hard to explain the ethics of it, but really, if you do want to make sure that you're going to get paid for it, you have to follow the rules of the bounty. Submitting early before it's qualified for the bounty, there's a good chance it's not actually going to lead to a payout. So you just got to weigh those options.
Yeah, like not following the rules and then them finding like this loophole not to pay you. But
Yeah.
I think like the big projects that care about security, I think they would pay even like if you found a legit bug, even if there's some sort of loophole, they probably wouldn't try to squirm out of it, right? They'll pay you. Like you see these massive bounties, like $10 million, like 1 million, 6 million paid out this year. How many 1 million plus bounties have paid out this year? I think like 5 or 6 off the top of my head.
I haven't followed. That's a good number to know.
Yeah. At least I think 5 people, and then one guy found 3. Poning.eth, he found 3 like massive ones.
Yeah, every time he posts something, it's a wild ride.
People just randomly popping out of nowhere and then getting these massive bugs. Like surely they must have had some sort of background before finding so much success.
Yeah, there's something about his process and what he knows that, I don't know, he just knows how to look for things.
Yeah, I think he found 2 on the same protocol.
Oh yeah, was that Aurora or?
Yes, yeah, Aurora.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess if you become like super familiar with one project, then it makes it a bit easier. Like if they push any changes or any sort of like new functions that they add, you can quickly review that. And like you mentioned, like looking at recent commits
Right.
for any changes. Yeah, that's
Right.
probably a good approach. Yeah. Have you received like more in terms of payout on Immunefi compared to C4?
Yeah.
Or is your C4 still the major one for you this year?
I've earned more on Immunefi this year than C4. I think Immunefi has totaled around, I haven't really done the math on that, probably somewhere around 300K this year.
Yeah.
Just
That's pretty good.
Yeah, just various bugs here and there. None that are really that big one that we're talking about, but just enough that add up nicely.
Damn, 300K. So you sort of moved away from C4 around like June, August after the OpenSea contest, and then in a couple of months, so you got 300K from Immunefi. That's awesome, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been pretty good. Yeah, had more luck in the last the last several months than previously. I've always been doing Immunefi throughout my journey, but it's been better recently.
Right. Yeah. Nice. Was that just that's not in one bug, right? That's like several bugs, smaller amounts adding up to 300K.
Exactly. Yeah.
How would you compare C4 with Immunefi? Obviously, you're having more success on Immunefi now. You're going to spend more time on Immunefi. Would you recommend people who are just getting into this start on C4 or try their hand at Immunefi? What would you recommend people to do on that?
I think if you're starting an auditing journey, I think C4 is by far the best place to start. There's so much knowledge that you can find through resources on C4 or just participating in the process. Taking the time to perform. C4 kind of packages what you need as an auditor very nicely. You can just open up the repo. You have the documentation available to you, through the contest links and whatnot. The developers are there to kind of talk you through if you have questions about their protocol. Really, as nicely packaged as you could want for a beginner or, an advanced person. But yeah, I would just start with C4 and submit some things and see how it works out for you. And also, you will immediately get feedback on what's wrong about your submission. I guess, once you pass some level of certification with C4 to see the findings repos. Yeah, really, I can't imagine a better place to learn how to audit than C4. I did start with Immunefi at the same time as C4, as I told you, and that was definitely a fruitless journey for a long time.
Right. So it wasn't until you sort of upskilled on C4 before you were able to find success on Immunefi.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, and I think I had the same feeling towards C4. It was such a valuable learning experience for me just getting into this industry, and like actually combining that with the other learning resources. I went through like Ethernaut, CTF, and Securium. And then I did C4 sort of in conjunction with that to sort of upskill. And yeah, I thought I was pretty happy with my progress, like getting around 20K and like top 60 on the leaderboard this year. But yeah, like obviously some people are making much quicker progress than me. And yeah, you and 100 Proof and some of the other guys in the Saloon chat. Yeah, it's some pretty amazing progress this year, and also Trust. He actually went from Immunefi back to C4, which I found quite interesting. I think I read somewhere he mentioned that he found C4 a bit more consistent, like in terms of just getting that pay every single contest, where Immunefi was a bit of a hit and miss. And he's actually crushing it on C4 at the moment. Like he's top one on the 90-day and 60-day leaderboard, which is very impressive.
Yeah, he's an impressive person for sure. Definitely impressive auditor. The bug I was telling you about, where we split a small medium payout, that was actually with Trust. Worked with him a little bit. Yeah, he comes from just such an interesting background. I can't really explain his background because I know there's a lot to it. Yeah, he's had a mind for it throughout his career, it seems like, and just his transition to Web3 seemed to be extremely seamless. But yeah, choosing to do C4 at this time was definitely interesting, but it definitely shows the difference between Immunefi and C4, because at this point C4 is saturated enough to where the pretty obvious findings, or findings that people will be looking for, will be found by several people, and they'll be worth a small amount of money relatively to the pot size. But Trust has shown that he's able to think of scenarios that are a little bit more out there that won't be found by many people, and those scenarios might not be rewarded on Immunefi even. They're edge case, they're very nuanced, but definitely valid. And C4 is willing to pay a lot for that because of how unique they are. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting, like how people approach like being an independent security researcher. And there's also like other DAOs that you can join, like Sparebit, Y Academy, and Audit One, and those sort of options. And they pay pretty good as well, just in terms of like that fixed rate you get per audit. Have you explored any of those options, or would you say Immunefi is pretty much your number one focus at the moment because of the success that you're having on there?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of interesting. I was going to go down the route of looking into Sparebit a little bit, I guess a few months ago. But actually, since then, I told you briefly, I've been building my own bug bounty platform. Although I've had pretty good recent success on Immunefi, there was enough time of turmoil in there where I felt unfairly paid, not just due to my lack of experience in the beginning, but more towards the middle range, where I feel like I had a fair share of unfair payouts, plenty of sob stories to share there. Kind of spurred myself and my partner to build our own, and we've actually launched as of the last month. We have a couple of bounties already launched, and there's quite a bit of difference between ourselves and traditional bug bounty platforms. But yeah, to answer your question, I've just gone full time on that for recently, and haven't really had the time to explore the more decentralized audit options out there.
Right. Yeah, and I think from what you've told me, you probably earn more from your Immunefi efforts at this point compared to those decentralized options anyway. So it's probably a wise decision to just stick with that and see how that plays out, at least for the next year or so and see what happens.
Yeah. The good thing is I think we have enough runway to, based on some of these findings, to kind of go full time in building our own thing and see if we're able to get that off the ground and hopefully get some nice participation from auditors.
Yeah, nice. So you mentioned like you were working with Trust. So were most of your Immunefi findings solo, or was it working with someone else? And did you find that helpful in terms of just like understanding the code faster and just having someone to bounce ideas off?
Yeah. Haven't done too much collaborative work. That was probably the only finding that I feel like was actually submitted with someone else. Trust specifically has been really good to work with because I bounced several ideas off of him that he's able to, I feel like within 5 minutes, tell me it's invalid, which is extremely helpful. You know, you've probably been in kind of like a pigeonhole where you're looking at a vulnerability and you definitely think it's legitimate, and you haven't quite POC'd it yet, but it definitely looks legitimate. And that second pair of eyes can very quickly tell you if it is or isn't. So yeah, I definitely recommend working with someone. Although I haven't done it much, it definitely pays off.
Yeah. I think working with someone, just having someone to bounce ideas off, that's one of the reasons why I decided to join an audit firm, because on C4, I was just sort of doing things on my own, and one factor was the time that I could spend on auditing. I was sort of limited to doing it part-time because I already had a job in traditional cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. And the other factor is, I just didn't really have anyone to bounce ideas off and work together on C4, which I think that will be really helpful. I'm just going to try and seriously upskill during my time working as an auditor at an auditing firm. So hopefully, in a couple of years, I'll sort of catch up to where you guys are at the moment. I still can't get how fast you were able to transition from a data background into smart contract auditing. It's just within this last year or something. Just incredible progress.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I'm a little bit jealous of the background you're going to be able to accumulate working in a legitimate auditing environment. I'm definitely happy with my progress this year. I think I'm definitely kind of specific. I think I am able to find certain things. But yeah, I'll definitely be jealous of your legitimate background here next year.
Yeah, people, most people seem to follow. I recently Michelle's blog post on how to become a smart contract auditor. I think many people have read that. That's how they got into the space, and he mentioned. So a lot of people, they go for that traditional audit firm route just to upskill and gain that knowledge, and then slowly, when they reach that top level, they can go off and be an independent researcher, and you actually earn more if you're at the top of your game. And you able to actually have so much success this year just on your own. Yeah, it's pretty incredible to hear, and I think it'll be really, it'll motivate a lot of people to join this space from either developer background or cybersecurity background, because I think a lot of other tech people, they sort of just they know of the blockchain, and then they, in their mind, it's just all scam, and they don't know enough about it and the opportunities that are in the space. Just hearing your story is pretty inspiring.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a great place to be in, and I'm glad I found it, and I'm sure you're glad you found it too. It's honestly the perfect gig, it seems like. Specifically talking about C4 and bug hunting, you're able to do your own thing on your own time and hopefully get paid for it. Right now, we're seeing kind of a pretty big downturn in crypto overall, and it might not be the best time to get into it, but you could have said that a couple years ago with Web3, but a couple years ago would have loved to have gotten into it at that point, and you'd be so much further right now. Hopefully the next bull run will bring a lot of new projects trying to get audited and come through C4, and hopefully we see a big spike in the need for auditors.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. And the downturn in crypto, like I think I got my timing pretty good. Like I got into C4 before it got super hard, and then I got this job before like the hiring really slowed down recently, because I've heard from some people they're trying to get a job as an auditor, and it's they're sort of having trouble around that. So I think I'm really lucky in that regard. And yeah, like you mentioned, it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out in the next bull market. I think C4 in particular, it's going to be interesting because they can actually like flex up their capacity of performing audits just like instantly, right? Because they've got so many eyes on the code and they can just push more audits through the pipeline and do more. But traditional auditing firms, they wouldn't be able to keep up with that demand in the next bull market. Right. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, C4's model is so interesting. I'm sure many people have ideas on how it can scale. Because it's interesting from an auditor perspective. You want less competition. Obviously, C4 and projects want more competition. More eyes on the code. So it's really hard to balance that. And I know if you've been in the C4 Discord, they were hoping that they would reach 40 audits or contests per week by the end of 2022, and here we are at the end of 2022. And it seems to be, I actually haven't been in C4 for a while, but it seems to be pretty steady on how it's been the last several months, and just that growth didn't come just because of the state of crypto. But yeah, if they were able to get to that point, competition doesn't seem like it would really be too much of an issue, because people will be able to choose the competitions that they want to partake in. But it would also be interesting to see how that would affect the final product of the audits that were performed. It's really hard for me to see, to kind of foresee how that would look.
Yeah, a lot of big projects I see they're sort of doing audits at traditional auditing firms and also C4, so they're doing like multiple rounds of audits. So I don't actually see like traditional auditing firms as like mutually exclusive to like an audit contest model, because a lot of the projects that care about it, they'll do multiple rounds anyway. And C4 sort of just finds bugs that even traditional auditing firms don't find. It works surprisingly well, and even like I heard some of the C4 the management at C4, some of them are worried, like people like the top auditors, like the original top auditors like C. Michelle and those kind of people, they sort of left C4 and started pursuing other opportunities, and whether that's going to like hurt the quality of C4 and the sort of findings that people are submitting. But it's not actually turning out to be the case, because you have people like Trust coming into C4 and then just absolutely crushing it. It's people come and go, and the overall quality is on C4 is exceptional.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be that fresh crop of new talent that's going to carry the torch and definitely make C4's final product definitely beyond passable. But yeah, I also find it interesting that although I don't know too much about traditional auditing, haven't really spent much time in that space or researching that space, but I think that projects are able to kind of have that direct relationship with an auditing firm. So new changes can directly be passed to the auditing firm for inspection, and that person already knows their code base. Something that I think would be just a big plus in contrast to C4, where kind of everyone is always going to have fresh eyes on that code, or fresh eyes in a bad sense. I mean, and not actually that knowledgeable about the protocol.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't actually think that has made too much of a difference. Like C4 contests are so short compared to audits that happen in auditing firms, and I'm surprised like the amount and the quality of bugs that are submitted in just 1 week for audit contest. Like when I was auditing, I would have trouble like understanding the whole protocol within a week, and people like making such progress and from like just understanding code base to like finding bugs is pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, for sure. I actually found that to be the most enjoyable part of C4 was not actually having to understand the whole code base. I don't think for a contest that was larger than 50K, I don't think I ever really truly scanned every single line of code throughout all the in-scope contracts. I would really focus on the ones that made sense to me at the time, like back then I would pretty much focus on staking, funds coming in and out, as opposed to the more nuanced contracts. So yeah, as an auditor, I guess you really just have to understand it all. So you have a little bit more on your shoulders there.
Yeah. Is that your same approach to Immunefi as well? Like go for the potential high impact sort of areas in the code rather than trying to understand everything? Because like you said, like medium severity findings on C4 just would get ignored on Immunefi. So was that sort of your same strategy?
I would say so. Yeah. Well, I guess if I'm thinking hard about it, I guess I don't have too much. I don't have too much of a process with that one. I'm pretty much looking at I guess any contracts that have funds and just kind of looking for any fruit there. Not too picky with what I'm looking for with Immunefi, but I guess I'm getting a little bit more picky about what I'm willing to submit, because that submission process and POCing something is sometimes the most lengthy part of the process. That's when you kind of have to weigh if it's probably worth the potential payout and the potential to not be paid out.
Right. Yeah, and interesting. Yeah. So that POC process obviously takes some effort to kind of do, because Immunefi findings, they require that POC, otherwise, you don't get paid.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you tell us a bit more about your success stories on Immunefi? Like how did you sort of find some of your most favorite bugs, and your story around that?
Yeah. I feel like there's not much build up to it. There's not really much of a story. They kind of just happen. I'd say a lot of them I really don't find too quickly. It really is it actually seems that if I do find a bug, I've actually reviewed that code base before, and I didn't find a bug that time. And I was actually kind of interested to see that bug was actually there, first time through, second time through, or maybe even third time through, I was actually able to see it. I feel like I've spent so much time in Immunefi over the past year that I've actually reviewed not most code bases, but a lot of them, and I've lapped them. I've gone through them several times now, which probably doesn't bode too well for me. I'm probably a little too quick with how I'm jumping through these, but sometimes it works out, and it just takes a few times through to actually spot something. But yeah, like I've said before, most of them all pertain to parameter spoofing that just ends up with something that the protocol didn't want to happen.
Right. So, I actually heard this from traditional bounty hunters in Web 2 and pen testers. Like, you find a particular bug that you focus on and get really, really good at it. Like you mentioned, parameter spoofing, and that relates to your previous work. So you focus on that particular bug class, get really good at it, and then you'll be able to find those really well compared to other people. Would you say that kind of describes your strategy?
Yeah, I guess not intentionally, but yeah, I guess that is my strategy. Just from an auditing standpoint, if you see any parameters in a function, knowing that they can pretty much input whatever they want, that fits that data type, right? And just thinking about, you're basically just kind of acting as just like a fuzzing machine. Just what are the most wild things that you can input into this, and what would that happen? If you need an address for a token, make that your own token, your own malicious token. Or if you need a number, can you make that number overflow something? It's all just understanding what you can do, and as a user, if you're calling a function that has no parameters, you can't do anything. Your only variables that you have is how many times you call it and when you call it. But then you add parameters, you have exactly what I just said, when and how many times, and also what. So you kind of build different dimensions of your potential attacks. And every new parameter is a new dimension. And at the end, you just have a lot of different options.
Yeah. Do you use any sort of fuzzing tools either Foundry or any formal verification techniques during your working on Immunefi, or is it just manual audits looking through?
I started with Slither kind of in the beginning, but I didn't find that too useful for me. And then since then, I'm just reading, really. Sometimes I'll actually POC while I'm auditing just to kind of test if something looks a little fishy, but I'm not completely sure. But that's about it.
Right. So pretty much like just read the code manually and just reason through it in your mind. And if you do find something that's fishy, you'll like potentially write up a POC and then submit it. Otherwise, if it's not worth it, then you wouldn't even submit in the first place.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
I was just gonna say it's definitely worth POCing something that doesn't even require a POC, because I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to the final step of submission and that didn't require a POC, and then I POC it and realize it's invalid. So for anyone who's thinking about doing that, I definitely recommend POCing anything.
Right.
I think that's why there are so many invalid bugs on C4, because POCs aren't required. It's also much harder to POC something that's not live code. And most of these C4 contests aren't live. They're just GitHub repos that you'd have to deploy yourself and deploy everything needed to create that POC. So yeah, I definitely nothing's really valid until you POC it.
Yeah, I do see how like POCing live projects are much easier. You can do it with Foundry, and 100 Proofs mentioned in his video. He just did like console logs, and then he found that bug worth 150K pretty much right off the bat. Do you do like framework wise? What do you prefer?
I'm actually just getting my feet wet with Foundry. Just over the last couple of months, just learning Foundry a little bit better. All my POCs were just done with Python and Web3.py, which is probably just like the slowest way I could do it, but it's what I know, so I just do it that way.
Yeah, that's a good approach. Stick with what you know. And
whatever works.
Yeah. Just like your previous knowledge will definitely come in handy. Like just reusing what you know already instead of like trying to learn something else completely new, and then you're not familiar with the thing. So yeah. Sure.
Yeah, you brought up Patrick Collins in the beginning of this interview. I actually learned about Web3.py and Brownie through Patrick Collins's videos. And just going through that, that's probably like a 12-hour video. That was enough to teach me how to POC something just to do it. So kind of just stopped there once I knew how to do it.
Right. Yeah. I actually watched that video as well, the Brownie one, and then I watched the newer one, which is in Hard Hat. I actually prefer Python as well, but I find like the context switching between writing POCs like in another language kind of annoying, because if you use Foundry, right, you can just write POCs in Solidity. You don't have to do that context switching. But I guess you know Python pretty well, so you can just like get into that and not really have you slow you down too much.
Yeah, as I've learned Solidity more and learned Foundry more, I definitely would only stick in Foundry. I definitely wouldn't go back to Python. If I would have taken the time to learn it in the beginning of my journey, I definitely would have done that.
Yeah. So recommended people getting started, learn Foundry. That's the best one.
Yeah,
all the
definitely.
Cool kids are using it these days.
Yeah, learn Solidity actually instead of just learn. Like I just knew how to read it. I didn't really know how to talk it. Really, if you learn Solidity code in Foundry, you'll just be miles ahead of where I was several months down the line.
Yeah, that's interesting, because most of the people who made really quick progress in this field, where they've transitioned from another field, they were developers, and you're the first person I've spoken to which actually came from a different field than either developer or like a cybersecurity background. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear your perspective around that.
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a developer though, just always a wannabe. I did like a coding boot camp to try to get into it, which just led to database stuff. So yeah, officially getting into like Web3 security actually feels like a legitimate developer role. So that feels good actually.
Did you have? Oh, I guess you were already doing like coding before, so learning a new language wouldn't really be too foreign for you. I guess you can pick it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, not too bad. I guess most of my programming knowledge was pretty based in Python, so that's kind of its own thing. So learning Solidity in JavaScript through building things to connect to the blockchain, that's actually been a new learning experience, which wasn't fun and easy, but I guess once you get through it, it's not too bad.
Right. Yeah. So at the moment, you can pretty much live off of Immunefi. And what else are you working on? Oh, you mentioned you were starting your own bug bounty platform. So you're pretty much like bounty hunting on Immunefi and working on your platform. So can you tell us a bit about your platform and how does it work?
Yeah, it's called the Saloon, and it's just kind of like the next generation of a bug bounty platform in our eyes. So Immunefi serves a really great purpose. There's definitely a need for a mediator between projects and hunters, but really that's as much as it is at this point. It's just a platform to submit bugs and for projects to be in contact with you. And having enough stories, of our own and stories that we've heard about hunters not being paid fairly, we decided that there was probably a better way to go about having a Web3 bug bounty platform. So we built the Saloon, which is a bug bounty platform that's in custody of all the funds. So there are a few things that make it different than traditional bug bounty platforms. Being in custody of the funds means that we're able to make fair payouts. We not only mediate, but we also validate submissions and can initiate that payout. So that's kind of great for hunters, that they don't have to worry about unfair payout. If it's a valid bug, it will be paid out based on the listed amount. But the other aspect of us that's really interesting is that it's not just the project's money that is being used to pay out bugs. Stakers can actually stake their own funds into the bounty pool, and that can be used for payouts. But why would stakers want to actually put their own money for bug payouts? Projects are willing to pay a good amount of money in the form of premium payments to have people put their own money up for risk, for bounty payouts. So for example, we just launched our own bug bounty. We're willing to offer 47% APY for people to stake funds in our bounty pool. If there is a bug, then we'll pay out with those funds. But if there isn't a bug, then it's a very attractive investment for auditors who are very confident in their skills to stake their funds and hopefully make that 47% APY. It's really kind of doubling down on your auditing skills and really being confident that you audited this protocol, there's no bugs. So if there's no bugs, there's really not much risk of losing funds there, and you can really take advantage of really high APYs.
Interesting way to sort of set things up. So projects will pay the funds in. So say, for example, if a project wants to pay $1 million for a bounty program, they have to give you $1 million first before you list it on the platform. Is that right?
No, actually. So I guess using ours as an example, we want to launch our bug bounty program for the Saloon since we have smart contracts. We have a vault, and we want to pay upwards of $10,000. Like, let's just say that's our maximum that we're willing to pay, $10,000. We don't actually need to submit those funds. That's just setting our cap for our bounty pool. And we say that, hey, we're willing to pay other people 47% APY for them to stake funds in our bounty pool. And our pool will fill up, and we're continuously paying them 47% APY for the risk. Obviously, people will only stake in there if they think there aren't any bugs that will be paid out for. But those funds can just come from decentralized individuals to fill up our bounty pool, and we're just paying out fixed risk APYs, just in the form of premium payments. So really, but to kind of back up a little bit, the entire process works by us initially starting with a deposit. So we'll deposit $5,000 in there just to get hunters looking at the code and give them fair payouts if they find something. But after that initial phase where hunters are looking at the code and probably getting paid for the findings that they've submitted, it can be pretty safe to say that our code is close to bug free, or people can be confident that there aren't any more bugs. So that's when we foresee investors or auditors themselves just coming in and staking some funds there and taking advantage of those high APYs, because the risk of a bug being found at that point is pretty low.
Right. So that really high APY is from the protocol themselves paying the premium to people who are sort of putting their money into that pool.
Yeah, exactly. The idea for this kind of came about with when reviewing some of the protocols on Immunefi that actually haven't ever made a higher critical payout. The one that comes to mind is Origin Dollar. Not sure if you've reviewed their protocol. But yeah, over the course of however long they've been on Immunefi, over a year or two, they've never actually had a bug that's resulted in a higher or critical payout. So taking them as an example, if they were on the Saloon and you were staking funds, you'd be 2 years in, never having any fund loss, but taking advantage of very high APY. So really, if you're a skilled auditor and you truly believe that your analysis of a protocol is sound and that there are no bugs, then you don't have too much risk of losing funds there, and you can just really reap some reward.
Right. So it's really up to the people who are they can trust in their skill set to say that there are no bugs here. I can put my money into the pool. So it's not really for like randos that just come along chasing that high APY. You wouldn't really recommend it to those kind of people.
Initially, no. I definitely don't recommend investing anything in something you probably don't understand. But eventually, if we pick up steam, we'll add functionality for top auditors to, maybe kind of show where they're invested in or show what they've reviewed, and have kind of the lay investor follow suit if they want to. Obviously, there's risk there, but there's also risk in all investments. So, kind of having more of a system of follow a guru in how they would invest in these, how they would stake in these protocols. That might bring some more non-auditors in.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. How you're doing the returns on those pools, because I recently saw Sherlock, who also does audits and does insurance. They actually lost like a bunch of money on like a CFI yield because they were apparently like chasing higher yield that would entice more stakers, and they lost money on that, which I'm kind of surprised that like a DAO such as a Sherlock would sort of fall to those CFI rug pulls. So you pretty much like the project will pay for the APY. You put your money in those pools. There's not really like any sort of risk in terms of like you taking the money and like putting it elsewhere, trying to earn yield or anything like that. It's just purely like almost sort of like an insurance model where projects are paying a premium and getting insured for getting hacked, essentially.
Yeah, you nailed it. In the current implementation, all the funds are going to sit in our vault, and they'll be paid out as needed. But we're not moving those funds anywhere. We have ideated on allowing projects to submit their funds, or specifically their project deposits, into a yield generator, or maybe allow stakers to allow us to move their funds into some sort of yield generator. That's definitely not implemented today, and that'll be an optional feature. So maybe people will want that extra risk, but also thinking about this from the standpoint of the only people that are going to be staking initially are going to be auditors who are viewing our code, so they'd probably review our adapters to those yield generators. And as a Web3 company, we will only be pursuing DeFi yield. Probably won't be taking those funds anywhere centralized.
Yeah, nice. That sounds really interesting. I've never heard of a model. This is like the first time I've heard a model like the Saloon, which that'll be pretty cool to see how that plays out. Well, how many bounties have you got at the moment? Because I think you just launched last week. Is that right?
Yeah, just the last few weeks. So we have our own, which is, I think the max bounty is currently sitting at about $5,000. And hopefully that increases organically as people review the code and stake in there. And we just launched our second bounty just a couple days ago, and it's a small one. It's actually a decentralized exchange that's just really small. Like their TVL is like $2,000. So they came on board and posted a $100 bounty deposit, and good for them for showing their commitment to security even when they don't actually have too much funds to put up. So the Saloon is kind of a place where even small projects can post something, and hopefully if people review their code and want to earn APY, a small protocol doesn't actually have to correlate to a small bounty. They set their pool cap at 10,000, so it has the possibility to grow to that big, if and hopefully that'll bring them a little bit of some maybe some eyes on their protocol, which might lead to investors, and hopefully they grow their TVL as well.
Right. Yeah, so in terms of like a protocol, deciding if they want to list on the Saloon versus like Immunefi or something like that, they would have to pay for that APY to list on the Saloon. Where on Immunefi, potentially they can just have no money up front and just list.
Yeah, definitely. There are pros and cons in thinking about it as a project. So if you go on Immunefi and you basically just have like a promise that you're willing to pay the max bounty amount. Let's say they want to pay $100,000 for theft of funds vulnerability. They're promising to do that, but they don't have anyone that has authority to make that payment. So it's just a trust model. But also understanding that if they are a fair protocol, they're going to pay that out. And there could potentially be multiple criticals, valid criticals submitted to them, and they would be on the hook to pay out for each one of those. With our model, it's a little bit different in that setting your APY, let's say they set their APY at 30% and their pool cap at $100,000, they're fixing their risk at the max that they'll pay for the year is $30,000, 30% of $100,000. If their pool is full at all times, which it won't be, because people will stake and unstake, and there will be times where it's not full, especially for the first foreseeable future of the Saloon's life. So yeah, it really is just kind of minimizing the risk for the project. They're able to put just a cap on what security means for them, and if it makes sense for the auditors who have reviewed the code, then it makes sense. If it doesn't, then it really doesn't. So it's kind of just like a fair market of bounties. And it should all just shake out as if the APY is attractive to the auditor that thinks it's safe, then they'll stake. If they don't, then they won't. So if the APY is too low and the project's just kind of setting something that isn't attractive to people, then it just won't really take off.
Yeah. So each pool is sort of independent to the particular project, and they'll set all those parameters themselves, essentially, to attract more coverage in terms of insurance.
Exactly. The project that doesn't want to pay too much will set a lower APY with a smaller cap, and someone who wants to get some eyes on their code and legitimately wants people to find bugs and hopefully help them secure their protocol will set something attractive.
Nice. That sounds super interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that how it shakes out when you guys grow and attract a bit more protocols and auditors onto the platform.
No, we're definitely excited. We've been working hard on it, and just at this point, we're just looking to onboard as many people as possible and see how this model fits in the space. Because I think people want some change, but we'll see if this is what's going to help the Web3 security ecosystem.
Yeah, nice. I'll leave a link to the Saloon in the video description below for people to check out if they want to either look for bugs on it or sponsor a bounty.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
So have you got any final recommendations, like to maybe students or people in other industries who are trying to transition into this field? You've made such progress, and it's been really inspiring to hear. What are your thoughts on that?
I think a really useful piece that I guess I haven't mentioned is that just being in crypto will teach you a lot. Honestly, so there's kind of being in crypto, and then there's really being in crypto. I originally got into crypto just with like the GameStop debacle back in like late 2020, and that led me to centralized exchanges and just buying coins. And then the next step is getting on Ethereum and start making transactions on the blockchain and doing things in DeFi. So before you even start auditing, I think it's kind of worth it to just tackle getting into DeFi and moving some coins around on on the blockchain, stake somewhere, even maybe small amounts, because before you know how to audit, you really don't know what's safe and what's not. I actually can't believe I staked in protocols without knowing what was going on behind the scenes in their smart contracts. But that actually just teaches you, or taught me, more about the blockchain than I can really imagine reading about in a book. And then from there, just like knowing your way around a block explorer is going to teach you a lot in how to understand what transactions actually look like in a block explorer, because maybe you had the same experience. First glance, it's kind of confusing. So yeah, I just the whole moral of the story is just spend time in crypto, and then you'll probably get to where you want to go, down the line.
Yep, definitely agree with that. When I first started, I jumped on Code4rena and started looking at the code bases, and I just didn't even know what the hell I was looking at. Like what is this DeFi, and sort of the terms that they were referencing didn't really make sense, because there's a lot of foreign terms and concepts in crypto and DeFi, and it wasn't until I went back and either used various protocols or read about the stuff. Actually, I probably haven't used protocols as much as I should. That's probably something I should do, just to learn a bit more about the actual, actually using it, or make it stick into your mind a bit more. But I'm just so paranoid, after learning more about smart contract security, I don't even want to touch anything. Even though I don't even have that much money in crypto, I just have the payouts from C4. But even that, I don't really want to touch any of those protocols, because I just get so paranoid now after after learning a bit more about the security.
Yeah, once you know how the sausage is made, you just don't really want to be in it. I feel completely the same. I'm pretty paranoid too. Yeah, just a single approval you set somewhere can eventually lose you money. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, and approvals, people just leave them everywhere. It's pretty crazy. I think the hack just happened last week or this week, where there was an approval somewhere, and then the protocol got hacked. I can't remember the name off the top of my head.
That happens every week, it seems like.
Yeah. This industry is so important, because we're sort of leveling up the whole security of the space to make people trust using these protocols a bit more. Do you have any future predictions how this industry will play out, either in terms of bounties, or what do you think? Do you think you will be still doing Immunefi at this time next year and still earning, sort of finding the same success, or what do you think is going to play out?
Yeah, I think I'm done with Immunefi at this point. I'm trying to go full speed ahead with the Saloon, and hopefully that becomes something prominent in the space. But in terms of bug bounties or just Web3 security in general, I think it's getting better. Although hacks are still happening, I think it's moving in the right direction. I look back at what happened in 2017, 2018, 2019, and a lot of those hacks and exploits just seem like they just wouldn't fly in 2022, 2023. I could be wrong, but it just seems like developers in general seem to be thinking a little bit more about security as they're developing than they did in the past. So I see security and bug bounty specifically as being a pretty critical aspect moving forward, and I hope to see bug bounties growing and becoming more profitable for hunters, because it really is an important job, to be able to just kind of be that rogue eyes on the code and hopefully save some money. Yeah,
100%. I sort of feel the same way. Back then, just 4 or 5 years ago, the hacks were just so trivial. It's crazy how trivial some of those hacks are. If you look at it nowadays, even this year compared to when I started on C4, I could actually feel a difference. Even the projects on C4, even they've leveled up their security.
Really?
I'm not sure if that's because of, or at least that's how I feel. I'm not sure whether that's projects getting weeded out in the bear market, or don't know what's the reason there. But definitely the baseline of security is improving, which is definitely great to see as more people come into this field and contribute.
Right. I think a lot of that has to do with standardization, with Open Zeppelin being able to be just used for so many things, which I feel was which required a lot more custom code back in the day. Just all those contracts with compiler versions in the 0.6, it feels like everyone was writing their own stuff, and now it just seems very standardized. When you tackle a code base, you see 60% of the contracts seem to be stuff you've seen before. like everyone's forking Uniswap or forking a MasterChef contract. So yeah, so that seems to be a good next step, that people are sharing code, and battle tested code is being seen more often.
Yeah, it makes auditing a bit easier and easier to familiarize as well, because you can just sort of go to those protocols that are forked a lot, learn them well, and then be able to apply that knowledge on like a lot of different code bases. I think that's I guess auditors should sort of focus on that if they want to go that like 80-20 rule, right? Like learn the thing that's gonna give you the most progress for the least effort.
Right, and on the flip side, once you really know what's being used, a lot of the times you'll be able to spot what's kind of novel in some of these protocols, and that's the kind of cream that might provide some bugs, some new bugs.
Yeah, nice. So are you active on any other socials? Because I don't think I found you on Twitter or any other platform.
Yeah, I'm not too active on Twitter. I feel like I used to be active on Twitter when I was just over the past several years, but since I moved to like Web3 and kind of working under the pseudonym, or not pseudonym, just the alias of Django, I don't know, I just haven't been too active. But I am on Twitter as Django on Chain.
Okay. But you're not very active. I'll drop your Twitter on the video description below anyway, just if people want to follow you to see what you're up to. So do you recommend people follow you on that, and then check out the Saloon, obviously, and any other socials, or is that pretty much it?
I think the best place, if anyone wants to get in contact with me specifically, if you want to go to the Saloon Discord, if I could give you that link, Andy, that would be a great place. You can just hop in there and chat with us. We have a channel called The Bar, and we can just talk about whatever.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, give me that link. I'll put it in the description. People should check it out. Really great group of people in there. Like at the moment, there's not too much people in the Discord, but everyone in there is pretty advanced in this field, and they know their stuff. So definitely recommend people join and have a chat to people who are sort of like on the top of their game in this Web3 security.
Yeah, awesome.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Django. Thanks for coming on and sharing your experience. Very valuable to hear your perspective on things, especially that Immunefi background. Like I didn't know you were that successful in Immunefi before chatting with you. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming on, man. That's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.